Princess stood in the grand throne room, her hands bound with energy chains that glowed blue in the dim light. The room was massive, with walls made of crystal that reached up into darkness. Hundreds of nobles and court officials lined the sides, all watching her with cold eyes. No one spoke. No one defended her. They were all too afraid. At the far end of the room sat her father, Emperor Sung. He was a tall figure dressed in black robes that seemed to absorb light. His face showed no emotion as he looked down at his daughter. Beside him stood her younger brother. Unlike their father, wore a small smile. He had one. "Princess," the emperor's voice boomed through the chamber. "You stand accused of treason. You have been found guilty of helping the rebel colonies. You have betrayed your empire. You have betrayed your family. You have betrayed me." Wanted to scream. She wanted to tell everyone the truth. The evidence against her was fake. The documents showing her helping rebels were created by. The witnesses who spoke against her were paid by her brother. But she knew it would not matter. Her father had already decided her fate. "I am innocent," she said, her voice steady despite the fear in her heart. "I have always been loyal to our people. Brother has lied about me because he wants the throne." Stepped forward. "How dare you accuse me, traitor? I found the evidence myself. I brought it to our father to protect the empire." "You created the evidence," said. "You forged my signature. You paid people to lie." The emperor raised his hand. Silence fell immediately. "Enough. I have seen the proof with my own eyes. I have heard the testimony. The law is clear. For treason, the punishment is death." Felt her blood turn cold. Death. She had known it might come to this, but hearing the words made it real. "However," the emperor continued, "you are my daughter, my firstborn. I will show mercy." He paused. "You will be exiled to the forest world of 4. You will live there for the rest of your days. You will never return to the empire. You will never contact anyone from your former life. As far as our people are concerned, you will be dead." Murmurs spread through the crowd. Some thought it was too lenient, others knew the truth. 4 was not mercy, it was a slow death. 4 was a planet on the edge of known space. It was covered in thick forests filled with dangerous animals. The trees grew so tall and so close together that sunlight barely reached the ground. There was no technology on the planet, no cities, no ships, just endless wilderness. Every who had been sent there before had died within a year. Most lasted only months. "You are no longer princess," her father said. "You are no longer my daughter. You are no longer anything. Take her away." Guards grabbed her arms and pulled her from the throne room. As she was dragged past, he leaned close and whispered, "Goodbye, sister. Try not to die too quickly." She was taken to a small room where they removed her royal clothes and dressed her in plain gray fabric. They took her jewelry, her communication devices, everything that marked her as nobility. They gave her a small pack with basic supplies, a water container, some dried food, a simple knife and a thermal blanket. Nothing else. The next morning they put her on an automated shuttle. No pilot, no guards, just her alone in the metal box. The shuttle flew for 3 days, sat in the small cabin and thought about her life. She had been trained since childhood to rule. She had learned history, politics, military strategy, and diplomacy. She could speak 7 languages. She could command armies and negotiate treaties. But none of that would help her now. When the shuttle finally landed, the door opened with a hiss. Stepped out onto alien soil for the first time. The air was thick and humid. Strange sounds echoed from the forest around her. The trees were enormous, their trunks wider than buildings, their branches creating a canopy so thick she could barely see the sky. The shuttle door closed behind her. The engines roared to life. Within seconds, it lifted off and disappeared into the clouds, watched until it was gone completely. Then she was alone. For the first few days, she stayed near the landing site. She ate the dried food from her pack and drank from a nearby stream. She slept under the thermal blanket, jumping awake at every sound. At night, she heard things moving through the forest. Large things. heavy footsteps and low growls that made her blood freeze. On the fourth day, she saw one of the predators. It was huge, covered in dark scales with 6 legs and a mouth full of teeth. It was hunting something smaller, chasing it through the undergrowth. Stayed perfectly still, hidden behind a tree, barely breathing. The creature ran past her without noticing, but she knew then that she could not stay in the open. She found a massive tree with a hollow space inside its trunk. The opening was high enough off the ground that most creatures could not reach it. She climbed up using roots and vines. Inside, the hollow was dry and large enough for her to lie down. It became her first real shelter. Days turned into weeks. Learned which plants were safe to eat by watching small animals. She learned to make simple traps for catching food. She learned the patterns of the predators when they hunted and where they went. Slowly, painfully, she learned to survive. She built walls inside the hollow tree using branches and vines. She made tools from stones and wood. She created a small garden of edible plants near her shelter. Every day was a struggle, but every day she survived was a victory over her father. They had sent her here to die. She refused to give them that satisfaction. Months passed. Soft hands became rough and her royal grace became practical efficiency. Her diplomatic mind became focused on immediate problems, finding food, staying warm, avoiding death. The princess who had lived in a crystal palace learned to sleep in a tree and drink rainwater and eat insects. The loneliness was the hardest part. She had no one to talk to, no one to share her thoughts with. Some days she talked to herself just to hear a voice. She told stories to the trees and sang songs her mother had taught her long ago. Sometimes she cried, but mostly she survived. Winter came, bringing cold rain and violent storms, strengthened her shelter and stored food. She made warmer clothes from animal hides. She learned to make fire without tools. Each challenge she overcame made her stronger. One night as she sat in her shelter listening to rain pound against the trees, she thought about her old life. The palace felt like a dream now. The throne room, the servants, the grand meals, all of it seemed unreal. This was her reality now. This forest, this tree, this simple existence. But deep inside something burned. Anger at her father, and a determination to survive, not just for days or months, but for years, however long it took, because someday, somehow, she would find a way to return, and when she did, they would regret what they had done. She did not know then that her chance would come from the sky, carried by a stranger from a species she had never heard of, a species called humans. Ho had been traveling through space for 3 months when the disaster happened. He was a scout for the Terran Expeditionary Force, which meant he spent most of his time alone in his small ship, mapping unexplored regions of space. Most people would find it boring. Ho loved it. His ship was called the Wanderer. It was not a big ship or a fancy ship. It had a small cabin where he slept, a cockpit where he flew, and a cargo bay where he kept supplies. But it was reliable and it was his. He was passing through an area marked as empty space when the alarm started blaring. His sensors showed debris ahead. Lots of debris. By the time he saw it with his own eyes, it was too late to avoid. Pieces of some destroyed ship, scattered across space like deadly confetti. Ho tried to steer around the larger pieces, but there were too many. Metal fragments hit the Wanderer like bullets. The ship shook violently. Sparks flew from the control panel. The lights flickered and went out. No, 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 Ho muttered, working frantically at the controls. He rerouted power from non-essential systems. He sealed the hull breaches. He tried to restart the main engines. Nothing worked properly. Life support was failing. He had maybe 6 hours of air left. The navigation system was completely dead. He could not even tell where he was. Emergency power kicked in, giving him access to basic sensors. He scanned nearby space for anything that could help him. There, a planet, just one. The sensors said it had breathable air and livable temperatures. That was all he needed to know. With the last of his maneuvering thrusters, Ho aimed the Wanderer at the planet and initiated emergency landing protocols. The entry into the atmosphere was rough. The ship was not designed for planetary landings even under normal conditions. With damaged systems and no real control, it was like riding an avalanche. The hull heated up until Ho thought it might melt. The ship spun and tumbled. He held onto his seat and hoped. The Wanderer hit the forest canopy at an angle. Trees exploded around him. Branches tore at the hull. The ship bounced once, twice, then slammed into the ground and skidded forward, carving a long scar through the forest floor. Finally, mercifully, it stopped. Ho sat in the silence for a moment, checking himself. His left side hurt badly. His head was bleeding, but he was alive. He unbuckled and tried to stand. Pain shot through his ribs. Probably cracked, he thought, could be worse. The ship's door was jammed. He had to kick it several times before it opened with a screech of bent metal. He stumbled out into an alien forest. The trees were massive, the air was thick and humid. Strange sounds echoed from every direction. Ho looked back at his ship. The Wanderer was broken, really broken. The hull was torn open in several places. One wing was completely gone. The engines were crushed. Even if he had tools and parts and time, he could not fix this. "Okay," he said out loud, trying to stay calm. "First things first. Assess the situation, make a plan, execute the plan." He went back into the ship and salvaged what he could. The emergency kit was intact. Good. That gave him medical supplies, some food, water purification tablets, and a multi-tool. He found his camping gear in the cargo bay. He pulled out anything that might be useful: metal sheets, wire, tools, pieces of equipment. His side was really hurting now. He sat down and lifted his shirt. A large bruise was spreading across his ribs. He taped them up as best he could and took some painkillers from the medical kit. That would have to do. He needed shelter. The ship was too damaged to sleep in safely. He started setting up a basic camp near the wreckage. As he worked, he noticed something strange. There were marks on some of the trees, deliberate cuts, shapes that looked almost like symbols. Someone had made these marks. Was someone else here? Another crashed pilot? Indigenous people? He did not know, but the marks were relatively fresh. That meant whoever made them was probably still alive. Ho continued setting up camp, but now he was more alert. He kept looking around, watching the shadows between the trees. Hours passed. The sun was starting to set, turning the forest into a maze of darkness and dim light. That was when he felt it, the sensation of being watched. He turned slowly, scanning the forest. Nothing, just trees and shadows, but the feeling persisted. Someone was out there. "Hello," he called out. "I'm not here to hurt anyone. My ship crashed. I need help." No answer, just the sounds of the forest. Ho went back to work. His emergency shelter was almost complete. It was not much, just a tarp stretched between trees, but it would keep the rain off. He was starting a fire when the pain in his side suddenly got much worse. He looked down and saw blood seeping through the bandage. The wound was worse than he thought. He tried to stand up to get more medical supplies from the ship, but his legs would not hold him. The world started spinning. He realized he might have been bleeding internally. That was bad, really bad. Ho collapsed next to his half-built fire. He tried to stay conscious, but darkness was closing in around his vision. His last thought before passing out was that this was a stupid way to die. Far above in the trees, watched the strange creature collapse. She had been observing him since his ship crashed that afternoon. The crash had been loud enough to hear from her shelter, and curiosity had drawn her to investigate. The creature was unlike anything she had seen before. It walked on two legs but its skin was tan instead of blue. It had no natural weapons, no claws or scales. Its clothing was strange, covered in pockets and zippers. It had been talking to itself in a language she did not understand. She had watched it work for hours. What impressed her was its efficiency. Despite being injured, it moved with purpose. It salvaged materials, it built shelter, it made tools. There was no panic, no wasted effort, just practical action after practical action. Now it was unconscious and bleeding, had a choice to make. She could leave it there to die. It was not her problem. She had her own survival to worry about, or she could help it. But helping meant revealing herself. It meant taking a risk. She thought about all the months she had been alone, all the times she had wished for someone to talk to, someone to help her. This creature had done nothing to hurt her. It was just a lost traveler like she had been when she first arrived. Made her decision. She climbed down from her hiding spot and approached the unconscious figure. Up close, she could see it was male. His breathing was shallow. The wound on his side was worse than it looked. If she did nothing, he would die before morning. She grabbed him under the arms and started dragging him. He was heavier than she expected. By the time she got him back to her shelter, her arms were shaking with exhaustion. She climbed up into her tree hollow and then used vines to pull him up after her. Inside her shelter, laid him down on her sleeping mat. She cut away his shirt and examined the wound. There was a deep cut along his ribs. She cleaned it with boiled water and applied a paste made from healing plants she had discovered. She wrapped it with clean cloth torn from her own spare clothes. His breathing steadied, the bleeding slowed, sat back and looked at the strange creature in her home. What had she just done? Who was he? Where had he come from? And more importantly, what would happen when he woke up? Outside, night fell completely over the forest. Strange howls echoed in the distance. But inside the hollow tree, two beings from different worlds rested together, neither knowing how much they would change each other's lives. Ho woke to pain and confusion. His whole body ached. His head felt like it was full of cotton. Slowly, carefully, he opened his eyes. He was in a small space lit by dim light filtering through woven branches. The walls were made of wood and vines, all tied together with incredible precision. This was not his emergency shelter. He tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. Pain shot through his ribs. He looked down and saw fresh bandages wrapped around his torso. Someone had treated his wounds. Someone had brought him here. Movement in the corner caught his attention. He turned his head and froze. Sitting across from him was a humanoid figure with pale blue skin. Her hair was silver and hung down past her shoulders. Her eyes were large and seemed to glow slightly in the dim light. She was wearing clothes made from animal hide and plant fibers. In her hand, she held a sharp piece of metal, probably from his ship. They stared at each other for a long moment. Ho's mind raced. An alien, an intelligent alien, on a planet that was supposed to be unexplored and uninhabited. This was huge. This was a first contact situation. He needed to be careful. "Hello," he said slowly in standard Galactic. No response. He tried again in Mandarin. Nothing. He cycled through every language he knew. The alien just watched him with those glowing eyes, her expression unreadable. Finally, she spoke. The language was melodic, full of sounds that Ho's tongue could barely reproduce. She seemed to be asking a question. He shook his head to show he did not understand. She pointed at him, then at herself, then made a gesture like she was questioning something. Ho understood. She wanted to know who he was. "Ho," he said, pointing at himself. "My name is Ho." She tilted her head, considering. Then she pointed at herself. Ho repeated. She nodded. It was a start. Over the next few days, they built a basic vocabulary. Ho pointed at objects and said the human word. Did the same in her language: tree, water, fire, food, sleep. Slowly, painfully, they began to understand each other. Ho's ribs hurt too much for him to move around much, so brought him food and water. She was careful not to get too close, always maintaining distance. But her actions were kind. Ho learned that had been living alone in the forest for many months. He learned that she had built everything in the shelter with her own hands. He learned that she was incredibly resourceful. More importantly, he learned that she was alone, exiled, abandoned. As his injuries healed, Ho started helping around the shelter. He showed how to make better tools using pieces from his ship. He taught her about leverage and simple machines, things that were basic knowledge to humans but seemed revolutionary to her. One day brought him to see his crashed ship. Most of it was ruined, but some systems were still intact. Ho's engineering mind started working immediately. Parts from here could be used there. This panel could power that. It was all junk by normal standards, but humans had spent centuries making junk work. "Can you fix it?" asked in her broken version of Standard Galactic. She was learning his language faster than he was learning hers. "Fix? No," Ho said honestly. "The ship is dead, but maybe." He looked at the wreckage with fresh eyes. "Maybe I can build something new." That evening, sitting by the fire and shelter, they talked more openly. His language skills had improved enough for real conversation. She told him about her father, the Emperor, about her brother, about being accused of treason, about being sent here to die. "Your brother sounds like a terrible person," Ho said. "He wants power," replied. "In the Empire, if you are born royal, you stay royal. If you are born a worker, you stay a worker. Everything is decided by birth." "That's messed up," Ho said. "Humans don't work that way. Anyone can become anything if they work hard enough. We don't have emperors anymore. We choose our leaders." Stared at him. "You choose. How does that work?" Ho tried to explain democracy. The concept seemed to blow her mind. In her world, the idea that common people could have a say in government was revolutionary. In Ho's world, it was basic common sense. "So any human can become a leader?" asked. "Sure, if people think you're the best person for the job, they'll vote for you. Rich, poor, doesn't matter. It's about what you can do, not who your parents were." Was quiet for a long time. "What about your empire? How big is it?" "We don't have an empire," Ho explained. "We have independent colonies that work together. Each one governs itself. We help each other, but nobody rules over anyone else." "That sounds chaotic," said. "Sometimes it is," Ho admitted with a laugh. "But it also means everyone has freedom. Everyone has a voice. That's worth some chaos." Over the following weeks, they fell into a routine. Mornings were spent gathering food and maintaining the shelter. Afternoons, they worked on salvaging parts from the Wanderer. Evenings, they talked. Ho told about Earth, about humanity's history, about the endless wars and mistakes and eventual peace. Told him about the Empire, about the conquered colonies, about the people suffering under her father's rule. "You want to go back," Ho said one night. It was not a question. "I have to," replied. "My people are suffering, the colonies are being abused. My father and are destroying everything for their own power, but I'm stuck here." "Maybe not," Ho said slowly. An idea was forming in his mind, a crazy, impossible idea. "What if we built a ship?" Laughed. It was the first time Ho had heard her laugh. "From what? Broken parts and forest materials. That's impossible." "Humans do impossible things all the time," Ho said with a grin. "We're stubborn like that." He showed her his plans. Using the Wanderer's power core, navigation computer, and life support systems, combined with a hull built from salvaged metal and local materials, they could theoretically create a basic spacecraft. It would be ugly. It would be dangerous. But it might work. "This will take months," said, studying the rough diagrams he had drawn in the dirt. "We have time," Ho replied, "unless you have somewhere else to be." Smiled. It was a real smile, warm and genuine. "Let's do it." They worked every day. Ho taught about engineering principles, force, stress, propulsion, energy management. She learned quickly, asking smart questions and seeing connections he sometimes missed. Her royal education, useless for survival in the forest, proved valuable for understanding complex systems. In return, taught Ho about technology and society. She explained how their empire was structured, where the power centers were, how the military operated, who might be sympathetic to change. Ho listened carefully. An idea was growing in his mind, bigger than just escaping this planet. "What if you didn't go back as an exile?" he asked one day while they were welding metal plates together. "What if you went back as something else? A liberator?" "Stopped working? What do you mean?" "The colonies, the ones suffering under your father's rule. They need hope. They need someone to show them that things can be different, that they don't have to accept the way things are." "One person can't change an empire," said. "No," Ho agreed. "But one person can start a movement. Humans did it dozens of times in our history. Someone stands up, says enough is enough, and suddenly everyone else finds the courage to stand up too." Thought about this, about the mining colonies where workers died in unsafe conditions, about the agricultural worlds where families starved while shipping food to the capital, about all the people suffering while her father and brother lived in luxury. Could it really be changed? "Even if I wanted to," she said, "I'm just one exiled princess with a broken ship and a human engineer. What can we possibly do?" Ho looked at her seriously. "Everything," he said. "We can do everything, we just have to be smart about it, and stubborn, mostly stubborn." 6 months after Ho crashed on 4, the ship was ready. It looked like no ship that had ever flown. Part wanderer, part forest materials, part pure human ingenuity. It should not work. By every standard engineering principle, it should fall apart the moment they started the engines. But when Ho fired it up for the first time, the engines roared to life. The power core hummed. The navigation systems came online. Against all odds, it worked. Stood beside him in the cockpit they had built. "Where do we go first?" Ho pulled up a star chart. "The mining colony, station. It's on the edge of your empire's space, far from the capital. If we're going to start a revolution, we start where your father's power is weakest." "A revolution," repeated softly, then louder with conviction. "Yes, a revolution." They lifted off from 4, leaving behind the hollow tree and the crashed wanderer. Took one last look at the planet that had been her prison and her salvation. She had arrived here as a broken princess. She was leaving as something else, something new. Beside her, Ho piloted the impossible ship through the atmosphere and into the stars. He was just one human. She was just one. But together, they were about to shake an empire to its foundations. The mining colony of Station floated in space like a rusted metal flower. Its petals were living quarters and processing plants, all connected to a central hub. Below it, on the surface of an ugly brown planet, mining crews dug for rare minerals that powered technology. The work was dangerous. The pay was terrible. Workers died regularly. Nobody cared. And Ho approached carefully in their makeshift ship. The station's sensors were old and poorly maintained. It was easy to slip past them. They docked at a cargo bay that was supposed to be closed for repairs but was actually just abandoned. Nobody fixed anything here unless it stopped the minerals from flowing. "Remember the plan," Ho said as they prepared to leave the ship. "We're just travelers looking for supplies. We observe. We listen. We find the right people to talk to." Nodded. She wore a hood to hide her distinctive silver hair. Ho kept his face visible. Let people see the human. Let them be curious. The station was exactly as grim as remembered from her brief visit years ago as a princess. Dark corridors, flickering lights, the smell of unwashed bodies and industrial chemicals. Workers walked past them with dead eyes, too tired to be curious. This place crushed spirits. They found a cantina where off-duty workers gathered. The room was filled with, all wearing the same gray worker uniforms. Ho and sat at a corner table and ordered food that looked barely edible. They listened. The workers talked quietly about the usual complaints: longer shifts, lower pay, a cave-in that killed 3 people last week. Management did not even send condolences, just replaced the dead workers with new ones and kept mining. "It's always been this way," one worker said. "Our parents mined, their parents mined, our children will mine, that's how it works." "Doesn't have to be," Ho said quietly. Everyone turned to look at him, the strange-looking stranger with the foreign accent. "What do you know about it?" another worker asked, not hostile, just tired. "I know that on my world workers have rights," Ho said. "They can organize. They can demand better conditions. They can refuse to work if they're not treated fairly." Silence, then laughter, bitter, hopeless laughter. "You're not from around here," the first worker said. "In the Empire, you don't refuse anything. You do what you're told or you die. Simple as that." "Is it?" asked, pulling back her hood. Several workers gasped. Her blue skin marked her as noble blood. Her silver hair made it worse. "What if I told you that the Empire is afraid of you, all of you?" "Who are you?" someone asked suspiciously. "My name is, I used to be a princess. My father, the Emperor, exiled me because I disagreed with how he treats the colonies. But I came back, and I'm going to change things." More laughter, but this time there was something else mixed in. A tiny spark of hope, quickly smothered by years of oppression. "One exiled princess," a worker said, "against the entire Imperial fleet. You'll be dead in a week." "Maybe," agreed. "But maybe not, because I'm not alone and I'm not asking you to fight the fleet. I'm asking you to stop working, all of you, at the same time." "A strike," the word was whispered like a curse. "They'll send troops, they'll execute the leaders." "Then don't have leaders," Ho said. "Everyone participates, everyone is responsible. They can't execute all of you. Without workers, they have no minerals. Without minerals, they have no power. You're more valuable than you think." "Even if that worked here," another worker said, "it's just one station. The Empire is huge." "Every revolution starts somewhere," said. "It starts with one person saying no more. Then another, then another. Before long, it's not one voice. It's 1,000, 1,000,000. An empire built on oppression is fragile. It just needs the right push." They talked for hours, told them about human concepts, democracy, unions, civil rights. Ho explained practical tactics, passive resistance, communication networks, coordinated action. The workers listened, skeptical but interested. By the end of the night, a few were convinced. That was enough. Over the next week, and Ho moved through station like wildfire. They met workers in secret. They shared ideas. They helped organize. Ho showed them how to use the station's communication system to send encrypted messages. Gave them hope, something most had not felt in years. Then they left. The ship jumped to the next colony, and the next. Each time the same pattern: talk to workers, share ideas, plant seeds, move on before imperial authorities caught wind of what was happening. At the agricultural colony of Bora 5, farmers lived in poverty while shipping food to the wealthy core worlds. Told them about food strikes, about keeping enough to feed themselves and letting the nobles go hungry for once. Ho helped them hide supplies and organize distribution networks. At the factory complex of Minu 7, workers built weapons for the imperial military while living in overcrowded dormitories. Suggested work slowdowns. If production dropped, the military would weaken. Ho showed them how to sabotage machinery in ways that looked like accidents. Word spread, not through official channels which the Empire controlled, but through the underground networks that the oppressed had always used. Workers talked to family on other colonies. Pilots shared stories. Traders carried messages. The Empire's vast size, which had always been its strength, became a weakness. It was too big to monitor everything. 3 months after leaving 4, the first strike happened. Station's workers simply stopped working. They stayed in their quarters. They did not fight. They did not riot. They just refused to mine. Management threatened them. They did not move. Security tried to force them back to work. There were too many workers and not enough guards. The Empire sent a warship to restore order. But the ship needed fuel, which came from refineries worked by sympathetic workers who had their own strike. It arrived days late, by which time 2 other colonies had joined the strike. Emperor Sung sat in his throne room and watched reports of spreading chaos. colonies refusing to work, production dropping, supply chains breaking. His advisors argued about how to respond. Send more troops, execute strike leaders, negotiate. Prince had his own suggestion. Find. This has her fingerprints all over it. She's behind this somehow. She's dead, Sung said. 4 kills everyone. Then we need to confirm it, insisted. Send scouts. Find her body, because if she's alive, we have a bigger problem than strikes. But finding one ship in an empire of thousands of colonies was like finding a specific grain of sand on a beach. And Ho were always moving, always one step ahead. And everywhere they went, they left behind people who had learned a dangerous truth. They did not have to accept the way things were. The revolution was not an army. It was not a fleet of warships. It was millions of ordinary people doing one small act of resistance. A worker refusing overtime, a pilot delaying a shipment, a farmer hiding food. Individually meaningless. Together, they brought an empire to its knees. Stood on the bridge of their makeshift ship, looking at a map of the empire. Dozens of colonies now showed signs of unrest. More were joining every day. It was working. It was actually working. They're going to come for us eventually, Ho said beside her. Your father will send everything he has. I know, replied. But by then, it won't matter. The colonies are waking up. They're remembering that empires need subjects more than subjects need empires. So what's next? Pointed at the map, at the bright star in the center, the Imperial. We finish this. We go to the heart of the empire and face my father, and we show everyone that change is possible, that even an emperor can fall. That's going to be dangerous, Ho said. Everything we've done has been dangerous, replied with a slight smile. We're good at dangerous. Their ship turned toward the core worlds. Behind them, the outer colonies burned with the fire of revolution. Ahead, the imperial capital waited, unaware that its greatest threat was not an army, but an exiled princess who had learned from a human that power belongs to those brave enough to claim it. The final confrontation was coming. And Emperor Sung, who had thought exiling his daughter was mercy, was about to learn that sometimes mercy is the most dangerous thing you can give your enemies, because it gives them time to become strong, time to find allies, time to return. And was returning, not as a broken exile, but as the spark that would burn the old empire down and build something better from the ashes. The Imperial of Prime hung in space like a blue jewel. Its surface was covered with gleaming cities and crystal palaces. This was the heart of the empire, where the nobility lived in luxury while the colonies suffered. It looked beautiful from orbit, but beauty, had learned, could hide terrible ugliness. Around the planet an armada gathered, not the imperial fleet but something more remarkable, hundreds of ships from across the colonies, mining vessels, transport ships, personal craft, even some military ships whose crews had defected. They were poorly armed and badly organized. Against the Imperial Defense Fleet, they should not stand a chance. But they came anyway. Stood on the bridge of their ship, now the flagship of this impossible armada. Beside her, Ho studied tactical displays. The Imperial fleet had superior numbers and firepower, but they were trained to fight other military forces, not a scattered swarm of civilian vessels. Their doctrine is rigid, Ho explained to the gathered ship captains via communication link. They form defensive lines and expect enemies to attack those lines. So we don't. We scatter. We move unpredictably. We target their command ships first. Without orders, individual captains won't know how to respond. That's insane, one captain said. We'll be torn apart. Maybe, Ho admitted. But if we fight them the way they expect, we'll definitely lose. This way, we at least have a chance. Prince commanded the Imperial fleet from his flagship, the Dominator. He watched the approaching swarm of ships with contempt, miners and farmers playing at war. He would crush them easily and then find. This time, there would be no exile, only execution. All ships defensive formation Delta 7, he ordered. Prepare to engage on my command. The Imperial fleet formed perfect lines, a wall of military precision. They waited for the enemy to attack those lines, but the attack never came. Instead, the colonial ships scattered in every direction. Some flew above the formation, others below. Some looped around the sides. There was no pattern, no coordination. It was chaos. "What are they doing?" the tactical officer asked, confused. "It doesn't matter," snarled. "All ships break formation, engage targets of opportunity." That was exactly what Ho wanted. The moment the Imperial fleet broke formation, it lost its advantage. Individual ships chased individual targets. The careful defensive lines dissolved into dozens of separate battles, and in that chaos, fastest ships slipped through. Their target's flagship. The Dominator was heavily armored and well defended, but it was also slow and designed for commanding, not direct combat. 3 mining ships, retrofitted with makeshift weapons, attacked it simultaneously from different angles. Their weapons barely scratched its shields, but they did not need to destroy it. They just needed to damage its communication arrays. "Communication systems compromised," the officer reported. "We can't coordinate the fleet." Stared at the tactical display in disbelief. Without communication, each Imperial ship was isolated. They could see the battle, but they could not work together. They had become a mob, not a military force. How had this happened? "Fall back to the planet," ordered. "Regroup at the orbital defense platforms." But the orders never reached most of his fleet. The ships that did receive the command retreated in disorder, chased by celebrating colonial vessels. The battle was not won, but the Imperial fleet's invincibility had been shattered. On the planet's surface, Emperor Sung watched the battle from his palace. His fleet was in disarray. His sun was retreating. Colonies across the empire were in open revolt. Everything he had built was crumbling, and at the center of it all was his daughter, the one he had thrown away. "Bring her to me," he ordered his guards. "When she lands, bring her to the throne room, alive. We will settle this face to face." Ship descended through the atmosphere with a dozen others. They landed in the palace courtyard where she had been arrested months ago. Guards surrounded them immediately, but they did not fire. Everyone knew what was happening. The workers in the palace, the soldiers, even some of the nobles. Change was coming. The old order was dying. Walked through the crystal corridors with Ho beside her. Guards escorted them but made no move to separate them. They reached the throne room. The doors opened. Inside, Emperor Sung sat on his throne, looking older than remembered. Beside him stood, rage burning in his eyes. "So you lived," Sung said. "I should have known. You were always stubborn." "I learned from my father," replied. "You taught me that survival requires strength. I just had to learn what real strength means." "Real strength?" Sung laughed bitterly. "You bring farmers and miners to fight my fleet. You spread chaos and call it revolution. That's not strength, that's desperation." "No," said. "Desperation is clinging to power while everything collapses around you. Desperation is ruling through fear because you don't know how to inspire loyalty. Desperation is exiling your own daughter because you're too weak to face criticism." Stepped forward. "You're a traitor, you've destroyed the empire." "I've freed the empire," corrected. "From you, from father, from a system that values birth over merit, from oppression and suffering. Yes, I destroyed what you built, because it deserved to be destroyed." "You think the colonies can govern themselves?" Sung asked. "You think democracy and freedom will make them strong? They need order, they need guidance, they need an emperor." "They need a choice," Ho said quietly. Everyone turned to look at the human. "That's what you don't understand. Humans tried the empire thing. We tried having emperors and kings and people who ruled because of their bloodline. Know what we learned? That ordinary people are smarter, stronger, and more capable than nobles ever gave them credit for. When you let people control their own lives, they build things you can't imagine." A human lecturing me about governance, Sung said with contempt. Your species is barely spacefaring. You have no empire, no grand legacy. What have humans ever achieved? We survived, Ho said simply. We nearly destroyed ourselves a dozen times. Wars, disasters, stupidity. But we learned. We grew. We got better. Not because some emperor told us to, but because ordinary people decided to make better choices. That's worth more than any empire. Could not contain himself any longer. He pulled a concealed blade from his robes and lunged at. The guards moved too slowly, but Ho moved fast. He pushed aside and took the blade meant for her. It struck him in the shoulder, deep and painful. Ho fell screamed. Guards grabbed, disarming him. The room erupted in chaos. Knelt beside Ho, pressing her hands against the wound. Blood flowed between her fingers. No, 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 stay with me. I'm okay, Ho said, though his face was pale. Just really hurts. You're an idiot, said, tears streaming down her face. Why did you do that? Because humans are stubborn about protecting their friends, Ho replied with a weak smile. You know that. Medical personnel rushed in. They took Ho away on a stretcher, wanted to follow, but she had business to finish first. She turned back to her father, her expression hard. You wanted to teach me a lesson by exiling me, she said. You did. You taught me that compassion is stronger than cruelty, that people united by choice are stronger than people ruled by fear, and that sometimes the best teacher is the one who comes from nowhere and expects nothing. She looked at the nobles and guards filling the room. The empire is over, not because I destroyed it, but because it destroyed itself. We will build something new, a commonwealth where every colony has a voice, where leaders serve at the pleasure of the people, not the reverse, where your birth doesn't determine your worth. You can't do this, Sung said. I'm still the emperor. No, said. You're not. You're just a tired old man who confused fear for respect. Guards, arrest him, and Prince, they will stand trial for their crimes against the colonies. The guards looked at each other. Then, one by one, they moved forward and took the emperor and prince into custody. No one fought. No one resisted. The age of the empire died not with violence but with a quiet surrender. Weeks passed. Ho recovered from his wound, was tried and imprisoned. Emperor Sung abdicated and was sentenced to house arrest. Worked tirelessly to establish the new commonwealth, negotiating with colony representatives, writing constitutions, building frameworks for democratic governance. But one evening she found herself standing in the palace courtyard, looking up at the stars. She felt a presence beside her. Ho, his arm still in a sling. How are you feeling? She asked. Better, doctor says I'll be fine. He paused. How are you feeling? Overwhelmed, admitted. Building something is harder than destroying it. Everyone wants different things. Everyone has opinions. Democracy is messy. Yep, Ho agreed cheerfully. That's democracy, but it's better than the alternative. I've been thinking, said, about what comes next. The Commonwealth is forming. The colonies are finding their voice. They don't really need me anymore. So what will you do? I want to see Earth, said. I want to meet the people who raised someone like you. I want to understand how humans became human. Will you take me there? Ho smiled. I thought you'd never ask, but I have to warn you. Earth is not as fancy as this place. We don't have crystal palaces or noble courts. Good, said. I've had enough of palaces and courts. Show me something real. A month later, their ship left Prime. Not the makeshift vessel they had built, but a proper diplomatic craft, gifted by the new Commonwealth. Was officially the first ambassador to humanity. But really, she was just someone seeking to understand the species that had changed her life. As the ship jumped to hyperspace, heading for Earth, looked back one last time at the empire she had left behind. It was different now. Better, but it was no longer hers. She had given the people their freedom. Now it was time to find her own. Beside her, Ho piloted the ship with easy confidence. Just a human scout who had crashed on a forest planet and somehow changed the galaxy. He caught her looking at him and raised an eyebrow. "What?" "Nothing," said with a smile. "Just thinking about how one person can change everything." "Humans have a saying," Ho replied. "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has." "That's a good saying," said. "We have lots of good sayings. Wait until you hear the one about not putting all your eggs in one basket." Laughed. The sound was light and free. Behind them, an empire had fallen and a commonwealth had risen. Ahead lay Earth, humanity, and a future neither of them could predict. But they faced it together, an exiled princess and a stubborn human, proof that the most powerful force in the universe is not weapons or technology or empires. It's the simple belief that things can be better, and the courage to make it so.